The homeless man chose to end his life at the exact spot where the lifeguard's father died years ago. As the truth emerged during the rescue, witnesses were left speechless. The morning sun hadn't yet burned through the marine layer when Andre Jenkins started his patrol along Venice Beach. His worn running shoes left deep prints in the damp sand as he jogged past the empty lifeguard towers. The beach looked different at 6 a.m. No tourists, no vendors, just scattered seagulls and the occasional early morning surfer. Andre's muscles ached from yesterday's double shift, but he kept moving. The pay wasn't great, but being a lifeguard was all he'd ever wanted to do, even after what happened to his dad. "Morning, young man," a familiar voice called out. Andre turned to see Senior Joe emerging from his usual spot under the pier, white beard wet with morning dew. The old homeless man carried everything he owned in a weathered backpack, but he always had a smile ready. "Morning, Senior Joe. Sleep okay?" "Can't complain. The waves sang me a lullaby." Senior Joe's eyes crinkled at his own joke. He pulled out a small brush from his pocket and started grooming his beard. "You're here early." "Yeah, covering for Mike. His kid's sick." Andre checked his watch. Tower 4 needed to be manned in 20 minutes. "Just like your father, always helping others." Senior Joe's words hit harder than he probably meant them to. Andre's throat tightened. "You knew my dad?" Everyone knew James Jenkins. Best lifeguard Venice Beach ever had. Senior Joe's smile faded slightly. "That day, I was here, Saw the whole thing." Andre's jaw clenched. He didn't need reminders of that day. The screams, the waves, his father disappearing under the surface. It all lived permanently in his head. "I should get going," Andre said, already backing away. "Stay safe, Senior Joe." The old man waved, then turned to greet a young family walking past. The mother quickly pulled her children closer, avoiding eye contact. Senior Joe's smile didn't waver, but Andre saw his shoulders drop slightly. At Tower 4, Andre climbed up and started his pre-shift routine. Check the radio. Test the binoculars. Inspect the rescue can. His mind wandered to the stack of bills waiting at home. Mom's medical expenses kept piling up, and his community college tuition was due next week. The beach slowly came to life around him. Joggers traced paths along the waterline. Yoga enthusiasts claimed their spots in the sand. 2 hours into his shift, Andre spotted trouble. A group of teenagers swimming too close to the pier's support pillars. He grabbed his rescue can and climbed down. A woman in designer swimwear stopped him before he reached the water. "Excuse me," she said, nose wrinkled. "There's a homeless man harassing people near the bathrooms." Andre knew who she meant. "Senior Joe doesn't harass anyone, ma'am. He's just saying good morning." "Well, he's making people uncomfortable. Isn't that your job too? To keep the beach safe?" "My job right now is to stop those kids from swimming into the pier's current." "Excuse me." He jogged past her, whistle ready. The teenagers actually listened when he called them back. Not always a guarantee. As they paddled to safer waters, Andre caught sight of Senior Joe being confronted by a beach patrol officer. "ID and registration," the officer demanded. "I apologize, officer, but I lost my ID last month when dash. Then you need to leave. This is a public beach, not a shelter." Andre watched Senior Joe gather his things, dignity intact despite the growing crowd of onlookers. Some had their phones out recording. Andre's radio crackled. Another situation needed attention up the beach. That night, after his shift, Andre sat in his tiny studio apartment. The view through his cracked window showed Venice Beach lit by streetlights. His phone buzzed, a text from his mom. "Doctor says we need to try the new treatment. Insurance won't cover it. Can we talk?" Andre's hand shook as he set the phone down. The community college acceptance letter lay on his table, mocking him. His dad's voice echoed in his memory. "Education first, son. Promise me." He headed to his night class anyway, the weight of his father's legacy sitting heavy on his shoulders. The business management professor droned on about profit margins, while Andre's mind drifted to mortgage payments and hospital bills. Walking home after class, he passed Senior Joe's usual spot. The old man sat alone, reading a tattered paperback by streetlight. Their eyes met briefly. Andre saw something familiar in them. The same look his father had that last morning, like carrying something too heavy to bear alone. "You okay, Senior?" "Joe." "Always okay, young man. Always okay." But his voice shook slightly. Andre hesitated, then continued home. That night, he dreamed of waves and his father's voice calling from somewhere in the dark water. He woke up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, the sound of sirens wailing outside his window. Tomorrow would be his day off, but sleep didn't come again. He lay awake, listening to the waves crash against the shore, wondering if he was strong enough to carry all these burdens. His mother's illness, his father's legacy, his own dreams. The marine layer rolled in, thick and heavy, matching the weight in his chest. Early morning light began to seep through his window. Another day in Venice Beach was beginning, bringing with it all the responsibilities and decisions he wasn't ready to face. But like his father always said, the ocean doesn't care if you're ready or not. The waves keep coming, and someone has to be there to watch them. Andre got up and made coffee in his chipped mug, watching the steam rise like morning fog off the Pacific. His phone buzzed again, the hospital calling about his mother's mispayment. He let it go to voicemail. Some waves you just weren't ready to face yet. Andre deleted the hospital's voicemail without listening to it. His day off had barely started, but his stomach already churned with anxiety. The bus ride to St. Mary's Hospital felt longer than usual, each stop dragging out the inevitable conversation with his mom. Room 415 smelled of antiseptic and wilting flowers. His mother, Sarah Jenkins, sat propped up against white pillows that made her skin look even darker. She tried to smile when she saw him, but Andre noticed how it didn't reach her eyes. "Baby, you look tired," she said, patting the bed beside her. "I'm fine, Mom. How are you feeling?" "Oh, you know me. Fighting." She reached for a stack of papers on her bedside table. Her hands shook. "But we need to talk about these." Andre took the papers. Medical bills, treatment plans, insurance rejections. Numbers blurred together, but one stood out. $47,000. "They're saying if we don't make a payment this week." His mother's voice cracked. "I'll figure it out." Andre's words came out harder than he meant them to. "Not by dropping out of school." Sarah grabbed his hand. "Your father Dad's not here, Mom." The moment he said it, he wished he could take it back. Silence filled the room. A nurse walked past in squeaking shoes. Someone was crying in the next room over. "He would be so proud of you," Sarah finally said. "Working as a lifeguard, going to school. You're carrying on his legacy." Andre stood up abruptly. "I need some air." I'll figure out the bills, Mom. I promise." He walked out before she could see his tears. In the hospital hallway, he passed rooms full of other families dealing with their own crises. A doctor rushed past, looking as tired as Andre felt. Outside, he sat on a bench and pulled out his father's old wallet, the only thing they'd recovered from that day. The leather was still stiff with dried salt water. Inside, behind his father's faded lifeguard certification, Andre kept his own college acceptance letter. "Education first, son. Promise me." His father's last words before heading out for his final shift played on repeat in Andre's head. He'd made that promise, but promises didn't pay bills. The bus ride back to Venice Beach gave him too much time to think. He got off early, needing to walk, to move, to do something. The morning marine layer had burned off, leaving the beach packed with tourists and locals alike. Near his usual spot under the pier, Senior Joe sat staring at the water. Something was different about him today. His normally well-groomed beard was tangled, and he hadn't acknowledged any passing children with his usual wave. "Senior Joe." Andre approached carefully. "Everything okay?" The old man looked up slowly, his eyes red-rimmed. "Some days are harder than others, young man. Tell me about it." Andre sat down in the sand beside him. "You ever feel like you're just taking up space?" "Senior." Joe's voice was barely audible over the surf. "Like maybe everyone would be better off if you just—" He trailed off, but Andre felt a chill despite the warm day. "My daughter called yesterday, Senior." Joe continued. "First time in 15 years. Told me to stop trying to contact my grandkids." His hands trembled as he pulled something from his pocket, a crumpled photo of a young family. "Can't blame her. I wasn't there when she needed me." chose the bottle instead. Andre didn't know what to say. Up the beach, a group of wealthy teenagers laughed as they passed, pointing phones in their direction. "Look at the homeless guy crying," one said loudly. "Gross. Someone should make them leave." Senior. Joe's shoulders hunched further. He carefully tucked the photo away. "Don't listen to them," Andre said. "Why not? They're right. I am gross. Worthless. A burden." Senior. Joe stood up shakily. "Maybe it's time I stopped being everyone's problem." "Hey, that's not Dash, but Senior." Joe was already walking away, leaving his usual spot for the first time in years. Andre watched him disappear into the crowd, something heavy settling in his gut. His phone buzzed again, another hospital number. Andre ignored it and headed home to his studio apartment. The stack of bills on his table had grown somehow, like they were multiplying when he wasn't looking. He sorted through them mechanically. Hospital. Rent. Tuition. Hospital again. The numbers swam before his eyes. Even if he dropped out and worked double shifts every day, it wouldn't be enough. A siren wailed outside his window. Andre looked out at the beach, remembering another siren 9 years ago. He'd been doing homework when the police came to tell them about his dad. The sun was setting now, painting Venice Beach in colors his father would have loved. Tourists were packing up their umbrellas. Shop owners were closing down for the night. And somewhere out there, Senior. Joe was alone with whatever dark thoughts had put that look in his eyes. Andre's radio scanner, kept from his days as a junior lifeguard, crackled to life in the corner. He always kept it on, even off duty. Force of habit. Or maybe something else. Disturbance near Tower 8. Possible jumper on the pier. Andre was moving before the dispatcher finished speaking. He knew, somehow, even before he got there, knew who it would be. The same pier. The same time of day. Even the waves looked the same as they had 9 years ago when they took his father. History didn't just repeat itself, Andre realized as he ran. Sometimes it waited for you, patient as the tide, ready to test if you'd learned anything since the last time. The scream started just as the sun touched the horizon. Andre's legs burned as he sprinted across the cooling sand. More screams erupted from the pier, followed by the sound of splashing. A crowd was already gathering at the railings, phones out, recording instead of helping. "Someone call 911. Oh my God, he jumped." "Is that the homeless guy?" Through gaps in the crowd, Andre saw Senior. Joe thrashing in the water. The old man had chosen the exact spot, the same section of pier where Andre's father had made his final rescue attempt 9 years ago. Andre's chest tightened. The evening sun cast the same orange glow across the water. The waves crashed against the pier's pillars with the same rhythm. Even the wind carried the same salt-heavy scent. "Get back!" Andre shouted, pushing through the crowd. He didn't have his rescue can or his radio. No backup. No equipment. Just like his father that day. Senior. Joe's white beard bobbed in the churning water. His arms flailed weakly, already tired from fighting the current. Andre kicked off his shoes and yanked his shirt over his head. "Don't!" someone yelled. "Wait for the rescue team." Andre ignored them. The water hit him like a punch to the chest, colder than he expected. Salt spray stung his eyes as he started swimming, muscle memory from years of training taking over. "Senior." "Joe," he called out. "I'm coming. Keep your head up." The old man's response was garbled by waves and distance. Andre pushed harder, his arms cutting through the water in practice strokes. But something was wrong. The current pulled stronger than it should, dragging them both toward the pier's support pillars. "Look at that current. He's not going to make it. Someone do something." The voices from above faded as Andre focused on the rescue. 20 feet away. 15. 10. Senior. Joe's movements were getting weaker. A wave slammed into Andre's side, throwing him off course. He swallowed seawater, bitter and burning. When he surfaced, Senior. Joe was further away, being pulled deeper under the pier. "Hold on." Andre's voice cracked with desperation. "Senior." Joe's head disappeared under the water. Andre dove, eyes burning in the murky darkness. His hand brushed something fabric, and he grabbed it, pulling hard. They surfaced together, Senior. Joe gasping and coughing. "Let me go." The old man sputtered. Please, just let me go. Not happening. Andre tightened his grip. I chose this spot for a reason. Senior. Joe's voice was barely a whisper. Same place your father. I saw him that day. Saw how he fought. He was a hero. Another wave crashed over them. Andre's muscles screamed as he fought to keep them both afloat. The current yanked them closer to the pillars, where the waves broke with skull-crushing force. I'm tired, Senior. Joe continued. So tired of being a burden, of disappointing everyone. Save your breath. Andre tried to angle them away from the pier, but the current was too strong. Above them, the crowd had grown. Phone cameras flashed. Someone had thrown a life ring, but it landed too far away, useless. More homeless drama. Why is he risking his life for that old guy? Someone streaming this live. The next wave spun them around, and Andre saw it. The same support pillar that had claimed his father. Barnacles crusted its surface like teeth, ready to tear flesh from bone. The water churned around its base, creating a vortex that could pin a swimmer until their air ran out. His father's voice echoed in his head. Sometimes the ocean decides for you, son. You just have to be strong enough to decide back. But his arms felt like lead. His legs trembled with exhaustion. Senior. Joe had gone limp in his grip, either from exhaustion or surrender. The current pulled them inexorably toward the pillar. A flash of memory. 9-year-old Andre watching from the beach as they searched for his father's body. The way his mother collapsed when they told her. The weight of promises made to a ghost. I can't, Andre gasped. I can't let go. Not again. The pillar loomed closer. Water roared in his ears. His muscles seized with cold and fatigue. One arm held Senior. Joe's limp form. The other fought the current. Neither felt strong enough anymore. Someone was shouting from above, rescue teams arriving too late, just like last time. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the water blood red. In the dying light, Andre could almost see his father's face in the waves, watching, waiting to see if his son would make the same choice. The current gave one final brutal pull. The pillar's shadow fell over them. Andre had just enough strength left for one decision. Hold on or let go. His father had chosen to hold on. It had cost him everything. Now, 9 years later in the exact same spot, Andre faced his father's final choice. The ocean roared around them, hungry for an answer. History held its breath and waited. Andre's muscles burned with exhaustion as he fought against the current. Each wave that crashed over them felt heavier than the last. Senior. Joe's weight pulled at his arm like an anchor, the old man's body temperature dropping dangerously in the cold water. Stay with me, Andre gasped, tightening his grip on Senior. Joe's shirt. Just stay with me, Senior. Joe's eyes fluttered open, his white beard plastered to his face. Why? His voice was barely a whisper. Why risk your life for someone like me? Another wave slammed them against the current. Andre's teeth chattered as he responded. Because you matter. I haven't mattered to anyone in 15 years. Senior. Joe coughed up seawater. Not since I lost everything to the bottle. My wife, my daughter, my job at the high school. The crowd above them had grown larger. Andre could hear sirens in the distance, but help would come too late if he couldn't keep them both above water. I used to teach physics, Senior. Joe continued, his voice growing weaker. Can you believe that? Dr. Joseph Martinez. Now I can't even remember what my grandchildren look like. A support lifeguard's voice carried across the water. Hold on, we're coming. But Andre knew they wouldn't reach them in time. The current was too strong, the waves too high. His father's training echoed in his head. When you're caught in a rip current, don't fight it directly. Work with it. Let it guide you. His arms trembled with fatigue. Tell me more, he said to Senior. Joe, trying to keep the old man conscious. Tell me about teaching. I loved it. The students, their faces when they finally understood something difficult. Senior. Joe's eyes grew distant. Your father used to invite me to his classes sometimes. Teaching water safety to the kids. Andre's breath caught in his throat. You taught with my dad? He never gave up on anyone. Not even a drunk physics teacher who'd lost his way. Senior. Joe's voice cracked. I was there that day, When I should have. A massive wave crashed over them, forcing them both under. Andre kicked hard, fighting their way back to the surface. Senior. Joe emerged coughing violently, his face pale. Getting tired, son. Senior. Joe mumbled. Maybe it's time to let nature take its course. No. Andre's voice was firm despite his exhaustion. Dad wouldn't give up. I won't either. Above them, the rescue team was attempting to position themselves on the pier. The current was too strong for a direct boat approach, and the waves made helicopter rescue impossible. Andre, a familiar voice called down. Mike, his colleague from Tower 4. There's a rescue buoy coming your way. Andre spotted the orange float being lowered, but the current carried it away from them. His legs felt like lead as he tried to adjust their position. I watch you sometimes, Senior. Joe said suddenly, his voice clearer. Working on the beach. You have his spirit. His kindness. He coughed again, weaker this time. But you carry so much weight. The guilt. The responsibility. Just like I did. The cold was seeping into Andre's bones now. His muscles screamed for rest. 9 years of training, of preparing for moments like this, and still the ocean felt overwhelming. When I lost my family, Senior. Joe continued, I thought I deserved the pain. The loneliness. But your father. He would stop by my spot under the pier. Bring me coffee. Talk about physics and ocean currents. He saw me when no one else did. Another wave hit them. Andre tasted blood. He'd bitten his tongue. The pier support pillar loomed closer, its barnacle-covered surface promising a quick but brutal end if they got too close. Getting harder to breathe, Senior. Joe whispered. Focus on my voice. Andre tried to sound confident despite his own fear. Tell me about the lessons. The ones with my dad. He would bring his rescue equipment. Show the kids how currents work. Senior. Joe's words slurred slightly. Used to say, the ocean doesn't care about your past. Only your present. Your choices in the moment. More voices from above. The rescue team was trying something new, a different angle with the buoy. Andre's vision blurred with exhaustion as he watched their attempts. Your father died trying to save someone like me, Senior. Joe said, someone who'd given up. Don't make the same mistake. You don't get to decide that. Andre's voice shook with cold and emotion. Dad believed everyone deserved a chance. Even physics teachers who lost their way. The current pulled them in a spiral, bringing the pillar's shadow over them again. Andre's fingers were going numb, his grip on Senior. Joe weakening despite his best efforts. From the pier came shouts of warning. The next wave would either push them into the pillar or pull them under it. Andre had seconds to make a decision. Senior. Joe looked at him with suddenly clear eyes. Let me go, son. Don't carry this weight. Not like I did. Not like your father did. Andre's muscles trembled on the edge of failure. The wave approached, massive and dark in the fading light. In that moment, he saw his father's face again. Not in the water this time, but in his memory. Teaching a class, helping a stranger, believing in second chances. The wave hit, and Andre made his choice. The wave crashed over them like a concrete wall. Andre's lungs burned as they went under, salt water filling his nose. His grip on Senior. Joe tightened instinctively, even as his muscles screamed for release. Let go. Senior. Joe's words bubbled up through the water. Save yourself. Their bodies spun in the current, disorienting Andre. The pier's pillar appeared and disappeared in the murky water, a dark shape promising death. His chest felt ready to explode. A memory flashed. His father's empty chair at dinner that night. His mother's face as the police officer spoke. The weight of absence that never really went away. They broke surface. Andre gasped for air, his vision spotting. Senior. Joe had gone limp in his arms. Stay with me. Andre shook the old man. Dad wouldn't quit. I won't either. From above, Mike's voice carried over the roar of waves. Andre, you've got to let him go. The current's too strong. The same words they'd probably shouted to his father 9 years ago. The same impossible choice. Senior. Joe stirred weakly. Your father, he was wrong that day. Sometimes letting go is the braver choice. Another wave approached. Bigger. Darker. ready to make the decision for them. Andre's legs had stopped responding, completely numb from cold and exhaustion. His left arm cramped violently, nearly forcing him to release his grip on Senior. "Joe, I watched him die, Senior," Joe said suddenly, his voice stronger. "Your father. He looked just like you do now. Same determination. Same refusal to give up on a lost cause." The wave hit. They went under again. This time, Andre felt his grip slip. "Senior." Joe's shirt started sliding through his fingers. Underwater, everything slowed down. Andre saw his father's face, clear as day. Not from photos or memories, but from that final moment on the beach. The way he knelt down, looked Andre in the eye. "Education first, son. Promise me." But there had been something else in his eyes. Something Andre had been too young to understand then. They surfaced again, barely. Andre's vision tunneled. Black spots danced at the edges. "I was the one, Senior." Joe coughed. "The one your father tried to save that day. I was drunk, suicidal. He wouldn't let go. Even when I fought him. Even when I begged." The words hit Andre harder than any wave. His grip loosened for a moment in shock. "I killed your father, Senior." Joe's eyes filled with tears that mixed with the sea spray. "Don't let me kill his son, too." The crowd above had fallen silent, sensing the gravity of the moment. The rescue team watched helplessly as the current pulled Andre and Senior. Joe closer to the pillar. Andre's mind raced. All these years, they'd never known who his father died trying to save. The police report just said unknown male, presumed drowned. The body never found. "I couldn't face anyone after, Senior." Joe continued. "Couldn't tell your mother. Your family deserved better than a drunk's apology. So I stayed. Watched you grow up, become him." Another wave approached, the biggest yet, the one that would decide everything. Andre's muscles had nothing left to give. His fingers were numb, barely maintaining their grip. The pillar loomed just feet away now. "Please, Senior," Joe begged. "Don't make his mistake. Don't die for someone who's already dead inside." Time seemed to stop. Andre saw two futures stretch before him. One where he let go, saved himself, lived with that choice forever. Another where he held on, fought until the end, maybe died trying, just like his father. The wave rose over them like a mountain of dark water. In its face, Andre saw his whole life. His mother in the hospital, waiting for him. His college acceptance letter. The stack of bills on his table. Senior. Joe's daily waves to children on the beach. His father's empty chair. "I understand now, Dad," Andre whispered. The wave struck. Water thundered around them. The current pulled with impossible strength. Andre made his choice. He pulled Senior. Joe closer instead of letting go. Wrapped both arms around the old man's chest. Turned his own back to the pillar. "What are you doing, Senior?" Joe's eyes went wide with terror. "Education first," Andre said through chattering teeth. "But Dad taught me something else too. Something more important." The current yanked them toward the pillar. Andre could hear the water crushing against it, feel the spray on his back. Everyone deserves a second chance. Even physics teachers who lost their way. "Senior." Joe's face crumpled. "No, please, not again." But Andre held on. The pillar's shadow fell over them. The crowd above screamed warnings. In that final moment, as the current pulled them toward either salvation or destruction, Andre felt strangely peaceful. He understood now why his father had made the choice he did. Why some weights were worth carrying, even to the bottom of the ocean. The water rose. The pillar waited. Andre closed his eyes. And his father's voice, clear as day. "Sometimes the ocean decides for you, son. But sometimes you get to decide back." Impact never came. Instead, Andre felt the current shift. His father's training kicked in through the exhaustion. The pier's pillars didn't just create deadly currents, they changed them. Split them. Redirected them. "Hold your breath," Andre shouted to Senior. "Joe." He twisted their bodies, using the current's own force to spin them away from the pillar's killing zone. Water rushed around them. Andre's back scraped against barnacles, but they didn't crush against the pillar. Instead, they shot past it, carried by the redirected current. How? Senior. Joe sputtered when they surfaced. Physics, Andre gasped. Water moves in predictable patterns. Dad taught me that. You probably taught him. The crowd above erupted in cheers. But they weren't safe yet. The current still pulled at them, just in a different direction now. Rescue team. Andre heard Mike shout. They're clear of the pillar. South side approach. Andre's arms shook as he held Senior. Joe. He'd used the last of his strength in that maneuver. His legs felt like concrete blocks dragging him down. Can't. Andre's head dipped underwater. He fought back to the surface. Can't keep. Let me help, Senior. Joe said. The old man had found some hidden reserve of energy. He started kicking his legs, weak but determined. I was a swimmer once. Before the bottle took that too. Together they fought to stay afloat. The current was weaker here, but exhaustion made every movement a battle. Andre. Mike's voice again. Rescue buoy coming your way. The orange float splashed down closer this time. Andre kicked with everything he had left, dragging them toward it. Almost there, he mumbled, unsure if he was talking to Senior, Joe, or himself. His vision blurred. The cold had seeped into his bones. Senior. Joe's hand reached out, grabbed the buoy's rope. I've got it. Hands reached down from rescue boats that had finally managed to approach. Andre felt someone grab his arm, start pulling him up. No, he slurred. Him first. Get him first. We've got him, a rescuer assured him. Let us help you now. Andre's muscles gave out completely. He felt himself being lifted, pulled over the side of a rescue boat. The world spun. Stay with us, kid, someone said. A blanket appeared around his shoulders. That was one hell of a save. Senior. Joe. Andre tried to sit up. Where? In the other boat. He's okay. You did it. Andre slumped back, shivering violently. The evening air felt arctic against his wet skin. His lungs burned with every breath. The boat's engine rumbled to life. Through half-closed eyes, Andre watched Venice Beach's shoreline approach. A crowd had gathered. Phones recording, news crews arriving, red and blue lights flashing. Got a pulse, but it's weak, he heard someone say. Both showing signs of hypothermia. We need ambulances ready. The boat bumped against the dock. More hands grabbed him, lifted him onto a stretcher. The movement sent pain shooting through his overtaxed muscles. Andre! His mother's voice cut through the chaos. She must have heard somehow. Come from the hospital. Baby, can you hear me? He tried to respond, but couldn't form words. His body had decided the fight was over, shut down imminent. Ma'am, please step back, a paramedic said. We need to get him to the hospital. I'm his mother. You can follow us there. Andre felt the stretcher moving, wheels rattling on wooden dock planks. Someone had put an oxygen mask over his face. The Puro 2 helped clear his head slightly. He turned his head, caught a glimpse of the other stretcher. Senior. Joe lay wrapped in blankets, his white beard stark against blue-tinged skin. Their eyes met briefly. Thank you, Senior. Joe mouthed silently. Then darkness took Andre. He dreamed of water, but not violent waves this time. Calm water, teaching water. His father stood in the shallows, demonstrating rescue techniques to a class of junior lifeguards. The ocean's power isn't in its force, Dream Dad said. It's in its patience, its patterns. Understand those, you can work with them instead of against them. A young Andre sat in the sand, watching. Next to him, a younger Senior. Joe nodded along, taking notes. Some people think surrender and survival are opposites, Dream Dad continued. But sometimes surrendering to the current is how you survive it. Let it move you, change you. Just don't let it drown you. The dream shifted. Adult Andre floated underwater, peaceful now. No struggle, no fear, just a gentle rock of waves above. His father's voice, you understood, son. Finally understood. Andre opened his eyes. Harsh hospital lights replaced the dream water. Machines beeped steadily nearby. Welcome back, a nurse said, appearing in his field of vision. You gave everyone quite a scare. Andre tried to speak. His throat felt like sandpaper. Don't try to talk yet, the nurse advised. You swallowed a lot of seawater. Need to let your throat heal? He turned his head slightly. His mother dozed in a chair nearby, looking exhausted but relieved. She hasn't left your side, the nurse said softly. The other patient, the older gentleman? He's stable too. Down the hall? Andre closed his eyes, letting relief wash over him. They made it. Both of them. Oh, and there's a whole news crew camped out in the waiting room, the nurse added, along with what looks like half the Venice Beach lifeguard team. You're quite the hero. Hero. The word echoed strangely in Andre's mind. He didn't feel like a hero, just tired, deeply, completely tired, but also lighter somehow, like he'd finally set down a weight he'd been carrying for 9 years. He drifted back to sleep, this time dreamless. The steady beep of monitors mixed with the distant sound of waves through the hospital window. In that space between consciousness and darkness, he felt his father's presence, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a lesson finally learned. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't refusing to let go. Sometimes it's holding on long enough to change the current's course. The first thing Andre noticed when he fully woke was pain. Every muscle in his body screamed like he'd been hit by a truck. The second thing was his mother's face, lined with worry but smiling. "There's my hero," she said softly, squeezing his hand. Andre tried to speak, managed only a raspy whisper. "Senior. Joe. He's okay. Recovering down the hall." She handed him a cup of water with a straw. Sip slowly. The water felt like razor blades going down. Andre winced. "Salt water damage," a doctor explained, entering the room. "Should heal in a few days." "I'm Dr. Chun. You've been out for about 18 hours. Andre's eyes widened. 18 hours? Your body needed the rest, Dr. Chun continued, checking monitors. Severe exhaustion, mild hypothermia, muscle strain, some barnacle cuts on your back. Could have been much worse. Through the hospital room window, Andre could see news vans in the parking lot below. A small crowd had gathered near the entrance, some holding signs. "You're quite the celebrity," his mother said, following his gaze. "It's all over the internet. Young lifeguard risks all to save homeless man. They've been trying to get interviews." Andre shook his head slightly. The movement sent pain shooting down his neck. "Don't worry," Dr. Chen said. "We're not letting any reporters in. Though you might want to talk to the police when you're feeling up to it. They need your statement about the incident." "Can I?" Andre's voice cracked. He took another sip of water. "Can I see him?" Dr. Chun checked his chart. "Let's get you stable first. Your blood pressure's still low, and those muscles need rest." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mike, still in his lifeguard uniform, poked his head in. "Hey, champ. Up for a quick visitor?" Andre managed a small nod. Mike entered, carrying a paper bag that smelled like burgers. "Brought you some real food. Hospital stuff's terrible." He set the bag down. "The whole team's talking about what you did. That move with the current? Using the pillar's flow pattern? Brilliant. Dad taught me," Andre whispered. Mike's expression softened. "Yeah, James would be proud as hell." Another knock. This time a nurse. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone else asking to see you." Says he's family. Behind her stood Senior. Joe in a hospital gown, leaning on a walker. His white beard had been trimmed and cleaned, his face more colored than the last time Andre had seen him. "He is," Andre said. "He's family. Senior." Joe's eyes welled up as he shuffled into the room. Dr. Chen frowned. "Mr. Martinez, you should be resting. Try that for 15 years, Senior." Joe said, "Time to stop resting." He made it to Andre's bedside, hands trembling on the walker. "You stupid brave boy," he said softly. "Just like your father." The room fell quiet. Even the machines seemed to beat more softly. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" Andre asked. "About Dad?" "Senior." Joe sank heavily into a chair. "Shame. Guilt. Pick your poison." He looked at Andre's mother. "Sarah, there's nothing I can say. You were the one?" Sarah's voice shook. "The one he tried to save?" "Senior." Joe nodded, tears falling freely now. "I didn't deserve his sacrifice. Or your son's." Sarah stood abruptly, walked to the window. Her shoulders trembled. "Mom?" Andre tried to sit up, winced at the pain. "All these years," she said quietly. "Not knowing. Imagining. And you were right there, under that pier, watching our family struggle. I was a coward, Senior. Joe admitted. The bottle took everything else. Seemed fitting to let it take my conscience, too. Mrs. Jenkins, Dr. Chin cut in gently. Perhaps we should continue this conversation when both patients are stronger. But Sarah turned back, her face wet but composed. No, it needs to be now. She walked to Senior. Joe's chair. My husband believed in second chances. And my son nearly died giving you one. Don't waste it. Senior. Joe bowed his head. I don't know how to start over. Not at my age. Not after everything. You start by forgiving yourself, Andre said. His voice was stronger now. Dad would have wanted that. A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Raised voices, rushing feet. Sir, you can't go in there, a nurse protested. The hell I can't. That's my father. A middle-aged man burst into the room, followed by a woman and two teenage children. He stopped short at the sight of Senior. Joe, Dad, Senior. Joe's hands tightened on his walker. Tommy, we saw the news. Your picture. Tommy's voice cracked. 15 years, and I find out you're alive from a viral video? I'm sorry, Senior. Joe whispered. I'm so sorry. The woman, Tommy's wife, stepped forward, the teenagers half hiding behind her. These are your grandchildren, she said softly. Emma and Michael, Senior. Joe stared at them like a man seeing sunlight after decades in darkness. Dr. Chun cleared her throat. I know there's a lot to discuss, but both my patients need rest. Perhaps we could continue this in the waiting room. Tommy nodded slowly. Yes, of course. He looked at his father. We'll be right outside. We're not going anywhere. As they filed out, the teenage girl, Emma, lingered. She approached Senior. Joe's chair. Grandpa? Her voice was barely audible. I'm glad you didn't die. She hugged him quickly, then darted after her parents. Senior. Joe sat frozen, one hand touching the spot where she'd embraced him. Sarah wiped her eyes. I should go talk to them. Help explain? She kissed Andre's forehead. Rest, baby. I'll be back. The room emptied except for Andre and Senior. Joe. Outside the window, the sun was setting over Venice Beach. The same view as yesterday, but everything had changed. Thank you, Senior. Joe said finally. Not just for saving my life. For making me face it. Andre looked at the old man. The physics teacher, the alcoholic, the ghost from his father's past who'd become part of his present. Dad used to say the ocean gives second chances, he said. If you're brave enough to take them. Senior. Joe smiled slightly. He got that from me, actually. One of my physics lectures. About wave patterns and renewal. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky orange. Somewhere out there, waves crashed against the pier's pillars, following their ancient patterns of destruction and rebirth. Two broken men in hospital gowns, carrying the weight of a 9-year-old tragedy. But maybe Andre thought some weights were meant to be carried together. The nightmares started 3 days after the rescue. Andre woke up screaming, sheets soaked with sweat, the taste of salt water in his mouth. The hospital night, nurse rushed in to find him fighting imaginary currents. It's normal, Dr. Chin explained during morning rounds. Post-traumatic stress. Your body remembers even when your mind wants to forget. Andre nodded, too tired to speak. His muscles still ached, though the pain had dulled to a manageable throb. The cuts on his back from the barnacles itched as they healed. Down the hall, he could hear Senior. Joe's family visiting. Their voices carried, sometimes raised in anger, sometimes soft with reconciliation. 15 years of absence didn't heal in 3 days. The press is still asking for interviews, his mother said, setting down a fresh cup of water. The story's gone viral. People want to know more about the homeless man and the lifeguard who saved him. Tell them no, Andre said. Actually, Sarah hesitated. The hospital bills came in. For both of you. And my treatment. Andre closed his eyes. Even here, the weight of responsibility found him. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mike entered, followed by the Venice Beach lifeguard chief, Robert Torres. How you feeling, kid? Torres asked. Been better. Torres nodded. That was one hell of a rescue. Using the pillar's current pattern? That's advanced stuff. Most guards would have tried to fight it directly. Dad taught me about water patterns, Andre said. And Senior. Joe. He taught Dad. About that, Torres pulled up a chair. We've been talking to the city council. There's interest in starting a new water safety education program, teaching kids about ocean physics, current patterns, basic rescue techniques. We could use someone with your experience. Andre blinked. What? Paid position, Torres continued. Full-time. Benefits. Enough to cover school, and then some. Sarah grabbed Andre's hand, squeezed it hard. And, Mike added, Senior. Joe's son Tommy? Turns out he works for a medical insurance company. He's helping fast-track coverage for his dad. Says he might be able to help with your mom's case, too. Andre looked at his mother. Her eyes shined with tears. Nothing's fixed yet, Torres said. But doors are opening. You just have to be willing to walk through them. Another knock. Senior. Joe stood in the doorway, still using his walker, but looking stronger. His grandchildren flanked him like honor guards. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but I have something to show Andre. If he's up for a short trip. Dr. Chin appeared behind them. Brief walk. Wheelchair only. No arguments. 10 minutes later, they formed an odd procession down the hospital corridor. Andre in a wheelchair pushed by Mike, Senior. Joe shuffling with his walker, the teenagers hovering nearby, Sarah and Torres following. They entered a small hospital conference room. A laptop sat open on the table, connected to a projector. Tommy stood next to it, looking nervous. Emma found something, Senior. Joe explained. Show him, sweetheart. The teenage girl stepped forward, clicked something on the laptop. A video played on the wall. Old footage, grainy with age. Andre's breath caught. His father stood on Venice Beach. Younger than Andre remembered him, demonstrating rescue techniques to a group of junior lifeguards. Where did you? School project about local heroes, Emma said. It was in the archives. But watch. The camera panned. In the background, a younger senior. Joe sat taking notes, clean-shaven and professionally dressed. The timestamp showed a date just months before everything fell apart. I'd forgotten about this, Senior. Joe said softly. Your father asked me to help explain wave physics to the kids. Said it would help them understand rescue patterns better. In the video, James Jenkins smiled at the camera. Remember, the ocean's power isn't just in its force. It's in its patterns. Understand those, work with them instead of against them, and you can save lives. Andre couldn't take his eyes off his father's face. So alive. So certain. The video continued. Young Senior. Joe stood, drew diagrams in the sand, explained current flows with the expertise of a longtime teacher. The junior lifeguards watched, fascinated. Water always seeks balance, video Senior. Joe said, even in chaos, patterns emerge. The trick is recognizing them, using them. Nature's greatest forces can become our greatest allies if we learn to work with them instead of against them. The video ended. No one spoke for a long moment. I've been thinking, Senior. Joe finally said. About that education program Chief Torres mentioned. Maybe you could use a physics consultant? Someone to help explain the science behind the safety. Andre looked at the old man, really looked at him. The beard was neater now, the hospital gown replaced with proper clothes. His eyes were clear, focused, present. You do that. If you'll have me, Senior. Joe glanced at his family. Tommy and Karen have offered me their guest room. Time to stop living under the pier. Start living again. The kids at the junior lifeguard program would love it, Mike said. Science and safety together? That's exactly what James always pushed for. Andre's mother stepped forward. It would be like having a piece of him back. His dream of combining education and ocean safety. What do you think? Senior. Joe asked Andre. Ready to teach an old physics teacher some new tricks? Andre looked around the room, at his mother's hopeful face, at Senior. Joe's renewed purpose, at the frozen image of his father on the wall. The weight he'd carried for 9 years felt different now. Lighter. Shared. Dad always said education comes first, he said finally. Guess he meant more than just college. Senior. Joe smiled. Real. Genuine. He was right about so many things. I just hope it's not too late to prove him right about second chances, too. It's never too late, Andre said. The ocean taught me that. Emma raised her hand slightly. I signed up for the junior lifeguard program this summer. Just saying. Senior. Joe's eyes welled up. Tommy put a hand on his father's shoulder. Baby steps, Dad. We'll figure it out together. Andre watched them. 3 generations healing old wounds, building new bridges. Outside the hospital window, Venice Beach sprawled golden in the afternoon sun. The same sun that had watched his father teach, had seen Senior. Joe fall, had witnessed Andre's own trial by water. Different patterns forming new currents, changing lives instead of ending them. Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway. All right, everyone, patients need rest. As they wheeled him back to his room, Andre caught Senior. Joe's eye. The old man nodded slightly, an understanding passing between them. Some debts could never be repaid. Some losses never fully healed. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe the point was learning to swim with the current instead of against it, to let it carry you somewhere new. 6 weeks after the rescue, Andre stood on Venice Beach in his lifeguard uniform, watching the morning sun burn through the marine layer. His muscles had healed, though sometimes they still remembered the cold, the current, the weight of choice. Ready for this? Mike asked, adjusting the portable whiteboard they'd set up in the sand. Andre nodded, scanning the crowd of junior lifeguards gathering nearby. 20 kids, ages 12 to 15, all fresh-faced and eager. Emma sat in the front, notebook ready. Just like old times, a familiar voice said, Senior. Joe approached, leaning on a cane now instead of a walker. He wore khakis and a polo shirt with Venice Beach Junior Lifeguard Program embroidered on the chest. His white beard caught the morning light. Nervous? Andre asked. Terrified? Senior. Joe smiled. But the good kind of terrified. The kind that means you're alive. The past 6 weeks had changed them both. Senior. Joe had moved into Tommy's guest room, started therapy, reconnected with his grandchildren. Andre had accepted Torres's job offer, enrolled in evening business classes, watched his mother's health improve under proper insurance coverage. Some weights lifted, others transformed. Good morning, everyone, Andre addressed the class. Welcome to the Venice Beach Junior Lifeguard Ocean Safety and Science Program. I'm Andre Jenkins, and this is Dr. Joseph Martinez. The kids sat up straighter. They'd all seen the viral video, heard the story. Emma beamed with pride. Today we're going to learn about water patterns, Senior. Joe said, his teacher's voice coming back naturally. The physics of currents, the science of safety. He drew diagrams in the sand, just like in the old video. The kids leaned forward, fascinated by equations that explained the forces they'd grown up swimming in. Andre watched him work, remembering his father doing the same thing years ago. Different time, same beach, eternal rhythms now, Senior. Joe said, who can tell me what happens when a current meets an obstacle? Emma's hand shot up. It changes direction. Like when you used the pier pillar during the rescue. A shadow crossed Senior. Joe's face, but he pushed through it. Exactly. The same force that makes water dangerous can also save you, if you understand it. Andre, would you demonstrate? They moved to the water's edge. Andre waded in, showing how to read current patterns, spot danger signs, work with the water instead of against it. My dad taught me these techniques, he told the class. He learned some of them from Dr. Martinez. Now we're teaching them to you. That's how knowledge works. Like water, it flows from one generation to the next. The morning passed quickly. The kids asked questions, practiced techniques, absorbed lessons about physics and safety and respect for the ocean's power. During the lunch break, Andre spotted his mother walking down the beach. She looked stronger now, her treatments finally showing positive results. How's it going? She asked, hugging him. Good? Really good? Andre watched Senior. Joe sitting with his grandchildren, sharing sandwiches and stories. Dad would have loved this. He does love this, Sarah said softly. Through you. Through them. Chief Torres appeared, clipboard in hand. Impressive program you've got here, Jenkins. City Council's already talking about expanding it next summer. We'll need more instructors, Andre said. Already got 3 guards who want to train for it. Torres nodded toward the water. Word spreading. Other beaches are interested too. The afternoon session focused on practical exercises. Senior Joe explained wave patterns while Andre demonstrated rescue techniques. The kids practiced with foam torpedoes, learning how to work with currents instead of fighting them. Remember, Senior Joe told them, the ocean's power isn't in its force. It's in its patterns. The class finished in unison. Emma stayed after class, helping pack up equipment. Grandpa, can we get ice cream? Like you used to do after your physics classes? Senior Joe's hands trembled slightly on his cane. I'd like that. They walked together toward the pier, 3 generations, making new memories in the shadow of old pain. Andre remained behind, watching the sunset paint the water gold. A familiar figure approached. Mike, coming to take over the night shift. Hell of a first day, Mike said. Yeah. Andre looked at the pier where everything had changed. Feels right, though. Your dad would be proud. I know. And for the first time, Andre really did know. He gathered his gear, ready to head home. His phone buzzed, a text from his mom about dinner plans. Another from Torres about next week's schedule. A photo from Emo of Senior Joe buying ice cream cones for his grandchildren. Different currents, forming new patterns. The night shift guards began setting up their stations. Couples walked hand in hand along the waterline. Somewhere under the pier, a new homeless man had taken Senior Joe's old spot. The beach absorbed it all, unchanged yet always changing. Andre started his walk home, body tired but spirit light. Tomorrow would bring more classes, more students, more chances to pass on what his father had taught him. Not just about water safety, but about second chances. About choices. About carrying weight until it becomes strength. His apartment wasn't much, but the view of Venice Beach still made it feel like home. He showered off the sand and salt, then sat by his window, watching waves catch the last light. 9 years ago, he'd lost his father to those waves. 6 weeks ago, he'd nearly lost himself to them. But the ocean, like life, moved in patterns. Destruction and creation. Loss and renewal. You couldn't fight the current, but you could learn to swim with it. Let it carry you somewhere new. On his table, next to his class materials, sat his father's old wallet. Andre opened it, touched the faded lifeguard certification. But it wasn't a ghost anymore. Just a reminder. A pattern to follow, like waves showing the way home. Tomorrow would bring more students, more lessons, more lives to touch. The weight hadn't disappeared. It had transformed, become purpose. Become legacy. Andre Jenkins, son of James Jenkins, teacher of ocean safety and second chances, closed his father's wallet and looked out at the darkening beach. The night patrol's flashlights traced patterns on the sand. Waves crashed against the pier's pillars, following their ancient rhythms. Different current, same ocean. Different man, same heart. The water kept flowing, and somehow, that was enough.